baby angels and little angels. Today we're wrapping up the series of the book of Genesis. So the last few weeks we've been reading the entire book of Genesis. So today we're wrapping up the book of Genesis and we're reading Genesis chapter 39 through 45. I'm gonna go in a little bit more details with the remainder of the scriptures here of baby angels and little angels. Before we get started, I'm gonna go ahead and get in prayer. Father God, in the mighty name of Jesus, I pray for baby angels and little angels today, God, that this message today will only help them, would help them have an understanding of who you are in their lives, Father God. Touch their hearts, touch their minds, touch their spirits, Father God. Leading God where you want them to go, Father God. As we go forth in you, Lord, I pray that everything that is revealed today will help them in a tremendous way, Father God. Lord, I just give you the floor today. Just to say thank you, Father. Glorify you and honor you. And the spirit and truth of everlasting being in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen. All right, baby angels, we get ready to share your screen, so we can go ahead and talk about this. So the book that we're reading today is in Genesis, and the story we're talking about God honors Joseph the slave. So this is 39 through 45. It's basically condensed so that you can all see what I'm talking about here. All right. So we'll go ahead and get started. All right. This is Joseph, and this is prophecy. All right. Joseph was wrong. Joseph was wrongly placed in prison by his former master, Potiphar. In prison, Joseph was obedient and helpful. The warden trusted Joseph to organize prison life because God was with Joseph. Prison became a better place for everybody. So Potiphar put Joseph in prison because of what his wife said that Joseph did. But in actuality, his wife pretty much made Joseph out to be a bad guy. But then you go back and hear last week's sermon, Sunday school service, she basically tried to push her way or try to convince that Joseph should be her husband, and that she wanted him to take the place of her husband Potiphar, and then his wife, Potiphar's wife, indirectly lied and said Joseph did that, and she snatched the coat from Joseph's arm to make it seem like he was taking advantage of her and doing this and that. But in actuality, she lied not once but twice, and that's how Joseph ended up back in prison because of a lie. This happened twice. Let's go back a little further. And the first part of it, Joseph's brothers didn't like him, and they found anything they could to get rid of him. So they dug this trench to throw him in there. And not only that, the brother Judah basically sold his brother off to a whole different, sold him as a slave to be a slave in Potiphar's location. And the father, which is Jacob, was grieving the loss of his son because of a lie that his brothers has told their father that their brother got eaten by a wild animal. In actuality, they, number one, they threw him in the ditch. Second, the other brother sold him off to Potiphar, and then Potiphar saw favor that, hey, this young man is doing everything. He's helping, so Potiphar made him the chief leader of all of his officials, and then Joseph had to go through it again with Potiphar's wife lying on him, saying he's doing all this stuff to her, but in actuality, he ended up being lied to again, or being lied on again, and ended up thrown into jail. And now, as we go into chapter 39 and 40 and through 45, because it's condensed, it's basically sharing that, hey, God is still doing everything. God is still doing his part, as well as Joseph. God is doing his part. Joseph doing his part. Joseph continues to be obedient and helpful. So the guardsman who's in there saying, whoa, this guy is still something set out different than him than others. So I've given you three different scenarios of why Joseph been going through all of this since the first part of the story. And now he's inside the prison, making a better place for everybody. He's pretty much carrying the spirit of God that's in him and spreading it to everybody inside the prison. The king baker and the butchers were jailed. Why are you so sad? Joseph asked them one day. No one can show us what our dreams mean. The troubled man replied, God can. Joseph said, tell me the dream. Your dreams mean that in 3 days you will be back in King Pharaoh's favor. Joseph told the butler, remember me, and ask Pharaoh for freedom. The baker dream held bad news. You will die in 3 days, Joseph said. Both dreams came true. So now, Joseph was pretty much here to interpret the dream for the butler and the baker and what the dream said. And you can see here, the three sticks out for both of these gentlemen. All right, the three sticks out. For this here says, dreaming that in 3 days you will be back in King Pharaoh's favor, Joseph told the butler. So the butler. So you see how that three sticks out, baby angels. Okay. Then he told the baker that his dream held bad news, that in 3 days he would die. And Joseph said both dreams will come true. So now let's go a little further. But the butler forgot about Joseph until Pharaoh woke up troubled one day. I had a dream, he cried. None of his wise men could show him its meaning. Then the butler remembered Joseph in prison. He told Pharaoh about him. Pharaoh sent for Joseph immediately. Your dream is a message from God. Joseph told the king, Egypt will have 7 years of plenty, then 7 years of awful famine. So you have 7 years of plenty, that means a lot of great things, and then you have 7 years of awful famine. Plan now to store food during the 7th good year. Joseph abide Pharaoh, or your people will starve to death in the famine. God is with you, Pharaoh declared. You will take charge in Egypt, second only to me. 7 years of plenty came. The 7 year of famine, food was scarce everywhere except Egypt, where they had widely stored huge supplies in Joseph's far off homeland. Jacob's family was starving. So Joseph interpreted the butler's dream and said that he was here to help the Pharaoh, because there's going to be 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. And in that 7th year, there's so many out there who'll be starving. So in that 7 year time frame, baby angels, they begin to really show that, hey, you need to store up these things because you never know when things are going to get rough. And that's just what that looks like, everybody. This illustration here shows that, hey, things were about to get rough and really bad. So we're going to go a little bit deeper. People from all countries went to Egypt to buy grains. You must go to Jacob's command his sons, or we have to starve to death. Arriving in Egypt, the son prepares to buy food. Jacob's sons bowed low in the lordly presence in charge of Egypt. They didn't recognize Joseph, their brother, but Joseph knew them. Joseph remembered his boyhood dream. God has risen him above his brothers. Joseph was very wise. He spoke roughly and kept his brother Simon hostage. Take food, go home and return with your youngest brother. He ordered, then I will know you are not spite. The brothers thought that God might be punishing them for selling Joseph as slaves many years before. Jacob and his sons were confused. Our money was returned in grains. As the ruler said, we must bring Benjamin. Jacob would not let Benjamin go. But soon the food was used up. The brothers had to go back to Egypt. Benjamin went with them. When Joseph saw Benjamin, he ordered his servants to prepare a great feast. The brothers were invited. Is your father alive and well? Joseph asked. Perhaps he was thinking of how he could bring the whole family together. Joseph also wanted to know if his brothers were really sorry for their sins of many years before. After the banquet, he accused them of stealing to punish you. I will keep Benjamin as my slave. Joseph said, my Lord, take my life instead of begging Judah. Joseph knew that Judah, who had suggested selling Joseph, was truly changed. No longer able to hide his love for his family, Joseph sent all the Egypts out. Then he began to weep. I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Amazed and afraid, the brothers said nothing. Joseph encouraged his brother, go make me Lord in Egypt, so I can save your lives and famish. Go bring my father, I will look after you. Jacob and Joseph were reunited in Egypt, and the whole family lived there in peace and plenty. So in this chapter 39, verse 45, it talks about how unity was brought up, even though Joseph went through all these ordeals with his brothers and they lied and sold him off as slave and everything he went through. In this whole story, he ended up saving his family after everything they put him through, everything he experienced, everything he had to deal with. So the moral of this story is everything that was done to him, he ended up continuing to be gracious, to be obedient, to be what God has called him to be. And God put him above his brothers, but he didn't do what they did to him. He went and rescued them despite of all the tragedy, the turmoil, and everything that happens upon him. So I want to read this story. No, the Spirit leads me not to. Let's begin to thank God today, baby angels. Okay, I was going to read verse 46 and stop it right there, not to. I encourage you, thank you, Spirit, baby angels, to go through Genesis 46, 47, 48, and 49. Thank you, Spirit. And I want you all in 50. And I want you all, thank you, Spirit, to look at the illustration of each of these scriptures. I want you to draw a picture of it, and I want you to think about it in your own image, like Jacob's journey to Egypt. So in this one, I want you to draw a picture of Jacob and the journey to Egypt, like a pathway. Okay. The next one is draw a picture of Jacob blessing Pharaoh. Okay. In the next picture, draw Jacob blessing the Messiah and Ephraim. And in chapter 9, Jacob's last words to his son. This is when Jacob's pretty much getting his sons together. So a picture of Jacob and all his sons and the conversation that they have kind of visualized out. And in verse 50. So this is the last one here. Joseph so this is where they're saying goodbye to Jacob. Okay, so an illustration of Joseph and how he is pretty much saying his goodbyes to his father in a proper way. Okay, so that's my assignment for you all to wrap up the book of Genesis, everybody. So I'm getting ready to head over to little angels, baby angels. We're going to come back with our closing prayer and our dedication and rededicating your life. I love you guys. All right, little angels. All right, good morning, little angels. Good morning. So now we've just gotten through the first part of the children's ministry, baby angels. You all have a homework assignment after this too. So we're going to get into the book of Genesis, chapter 39 to 45. I'm going to give you an assignment for verses 46 through 50, so you can kind of just illustrate the vast part of these here. All right. So this is, give me a second, the conversation here that we are engaging in. God honors Joseph the servant, the slave. I mean, God honors Joseph the slave. So now, Joseph was wrongly placed in a prison by his former master Potiphar. In prison, Joseph would obey his helpful wrath, trust Joseph to organize prison life. Because God was with Joseph, prison became a better place for him. The king, baker, and the butler were in jail. Let me pull this back so you can all see it. All right. asked them one day, no one can show us what our dream means. The true trouble man replied, God can. Joseph said, tell me the dream. So Joseph began to illustrate the dream to the two gentlemen. So the first gentleman, he talks about your dream means that in 3 days you must be back in King Pharaoh's favor. Joseph told the butler, remember me as ask Pharaoh for freedom. Ask Pharaoh to free me. The baker's dream held bad news. You would die in 3 days. Joseph said both dreams came true. So the butler had a different dream than the baker. So Joseph was basically there to illustrate these dreams and to prophesy to them, to explain to them what they really mean. But the butler forgot about Joseph until Pharaoh woke up troubled one day. I've had a dream, he cried. None of his wise men could show him its meaning. The butler remembered Joseph in prison. He told Pharaoh about him. Pharaoh sent for Joseph immediately. Your dream is a message from God. Joseph told the king, Egypt will have 7 years of plenty and 7 years of awful finish. All right? So this is the illustration of corn. So some just say stop right here. So we're going to go back a little further. How did Joseph end up in this situation? So at the beginning of the story, Joseph is the brother, and he had other brothers, and they didn't really like him very much because Jacob really favored Joseph, okay, and he saw so much and loved him so kindly and various now. So one day the brothers began to plot this whole thing on how to get rid of Joseph altogether. So they started thinking of ways of how to pretty much make him disappear. So the brothers came up with a solution. There was one brother who really didn't want to partake in that and didn't want to get involved in there. I believe his name was Sebastian, and he really didn't want to know what Sebastian. It was I recall. Give me a second. It started with an R, everybody, and he really didn't want to partake in that. But he wasn't there when the brothers went and did that. Built a big old ditch and threw Joseph in there to get rid of him. And not only that, Brother Juton had sold his brother off for all these different pieces to sell him off to slave to be pottery slave in another place. So they told this story about, oh my God, Joseph had gotten attacked by this wild animal and he's gone. His daddy was, Jacob was so distraught by what happened to Joseph that he couldn't even focus or even think because he was so in grief with the loss of his son, supposedly, right? So he ended up going to Pottery's location to be a slave, and Pottery saw something different about him that he does everything that God tells him to do. So Pottery made him a leader over his chief leader over his servants, and then Joseph had to go through it again with Pottery's wife, where his wife was just pretty much throwing herself on him and saying, "Hey, won't you take the place of my husband Pottery?" And he did not agree with that. So she held on to Joseph's coat. So not only did he get put in that situation again, but this time he got thrown in prison because of another lie. So there was lies being embedded in him, but not realizing everything that he had experienced or ever went through, God was always with him, and he knew God was going to always see him through. So now this ties into him being in prison, and not only is he's ministering to people in prison, but the guards see, oh, he's obedient, he's trusting God, so he's helping people in the prisons. And then he ended up interpreting these two guys' dreams, the butler and the baker. And the butler forgot about him when he got out of prison. Then he remembered, he said, oh, there was a guy named Joseph. Let me go get him now. So he went, and so Pharaoh went and got Joseph out of prison to basically prophesies to him about what they need to do in their land, how they can